I'm Aaron Lopresti. I've been a comic book artist, commercial illustrator, and writer for over 25 years, and this is my YouTube channel. You know what I always say? If you can't be drawing comics, at least be talking about comics. And that's exactly what we're going to do today in this episode. We're going to take a look at some of my Golden Age collection. So let's go crack open one of those old boxes and see what's inside. All right, check this out. This is Captain Marvel Jr. number 4 from 1943. It has an amazing and classic cover by Mac Rayboy, one of the finest comic artists and illustrators from the golden age of comics. This is a prime World War II cover. I got this from Metropolis Comics several years ago after I sold my Spider-Man collection. What? He sold his Spider-Man collection? I know, it's hard to believe. I can't even believe I'm saying those words out loud, but I had every issue 2 and up, but could never get number 1. Started getting frustrated with the whole idea of chasing a book I could never get. So I sold the collection. But actually, I did use the money to pay off a car loan, so it did go to good use. And with a little extra money, I invested it or reinvested in this book, which I'm quite happy about that I did. Because my friends over at Metropolis are always telling me, if you want to buy books, buy Golden Age. So I did, from them. And I've got this beauty to show for it. This is a 6.5, so that's a fine plus. Really nice grade for a book this old. Alrighty, this is National Comics number 32, featuring Uncle Sam with another great Reed Crandall cover. I actually collect National Comics, at least the covers I like, mostly the Reed Crandall ones. He's one of my favorite Golden Age artists, and again, like Mac Rayboy, one of the top illustrators that worked in comics back in the Golden Age. This guy could really draw. Now, the frustrating thing about this book is it looks like it's in pretty sweet condition, right? And I bought this at a Canadian show, I believe, years ago. And I don't know, I must not have opened it up because I sent it in to get graded. And it came back as a 5.0, and if I'd had any hair left, I would have pulled it out. It turns out that the centerfold is detached on this comic. So what would have graded as maybe a 7.5 or an 8 came back as a 5 because the centerfold was detached. That's enough to make a grown man cry, and I may have. But despite all that, it's still a killer cover from World War II comic. Okay, here we have Shock Suspense Stories number 13. This is an EC comic from the 50s. It has a pretty outstanding Jack Kamen cover on it. But the thing that makes this comic special is that it has the only solo Frank Frazetta story that he ever did for EC Comics. And by solo, I mean penciled and inked it himself. Generally, he worked with Williamson or some other guys and inked some stories, but he never penciled and inked one solo except for the one in this book. This is another book I bought. I probably was 19 or 20 years old when I got this from a local comic shop. Guy had a bunch of old ECs in pretty high condition that were on consignment, and I knew this had the Frazetta story in it, so I bought it. I just got it graded, I don't know, a year or two ago, and it came back as a 7.5. And I really thought that it would be an 8 to a 9, but apparently there's some real tiny creases on the cover that I couldn't find without a magnifying glass, but apparently they did. But still a really nice book in really nice shape. Okay, I do actually have some books that are not graded. In fact, most of my books are not graded. This is Haunt of Fear number 19 with a Graham Ingalls cover. And I know you're asking yourself, or maybe you're asking me, you're saying, Aaron, why is this so special? Well, I'll tell you why. Because it has the classic comic book baseball game story on the inside, drawn by Jack Davis. This was used in Frederick Wortham's book, Seduction of the Innocent, which, long story short, brought about the Comics Code Authority that we, those of us my age, remember from the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. But it's a gruesome story where a baseball team gets revenge against a player from another team who either killed or hurt a player from their team. But anyway, they disembowel the guy and use his organs for bases and use his head as the baseball. It's pretty gruesome stuff. But it's classic, and it was one that I wanted to get for a long time, and I finally found a good deal someplace on it. I can't remember where I got this. But anyway, it's about a fine plus copy, which, again, when you're talking about a Golden Age book, that's pretty solid. There's a motto around my house, and it goes something like this: you can never have enough ECs. Well, okay, that's really not a motto, but I just made it up. But it is, in fact, truth. This is Tales from the Crypt, number 34. And the reason I have this is because it has an outstanding Jack Davis Frankenstein cover, big Frankenstein face there in the foreground. I was at the Rose City Comic Con a couple years ago, and a local dealer here up in Vancouver, Washington, I Like Comics, had this hanging on their wall. And I looked at it and said, man, I just got to get it. So I took it up to them, and they said, you know what? If you'll come out to our shop for Free Comic Book Day, you can have this for free. And I said, sign me up. So I was there for Free Comic Book Day, and I got this for free, which was a wonderful thing on their part. But anyway, this is a great looking comic. I don't even know that I've opened it up and thumbed through it because the cover is just so great. That's why I ended up getting it. Oh, look, another EC. Now this is a classic cover for anybody who knows their ECs. And one of the reasons why is this is Al Williamson, inked by Frank Frazetta. I picked this up at a San Jose Comic-Con, I think from A1 Comics. I was originally going to buy a Defenders #1. A guy right around the corner had a Defenders #1 in near mint condition, which I had been looking for. And I was getting ready to buy it, and I thought, you know what? Flip it over, take a look at the back. Well, there was a massive printer's crease across the back of the book, and I told the guy, yep, I had my money in my hand, and I told the guy, nope, I'm not going to do it. He wasn't too happy with me, but there was no way I was going to get that. And I went around the corner, saw this, and they got my money because there was no way I was passing this baby up. Okay, this is a book that I wanted since I was a kid, and it's probably a book I should have included in my earlier video of four comics I never thought I would own. But this is The Mask of Dr. FuManchu #1, published by Avon in the 50s. Yeah, it has a fantastic cover, but the most interesting thing about the cover is, of course, it's by Wally Wood, and it's a very early Wally Wood cover. And it's just, my gosh, it's so great and iconic, at least in around comic book circles. And the other great thing about this book is Wally Wood drew the inside too. So you've got this great cover by Wood, and then on the inside, you've got an entire story by Wood. So a fantastic book. This one is not graded, but it's in the neighborhood of an 8 to 8.5, which is VF plus. The only problem is there's a very slight color touch-up. You can't see it, obviously, but right on the nose of the big Fu Manchu head. So that's kind of the downside to the book. But at the time I got it, I got it pre-internet. So someone had advertised a phone auction in the Buyer's Guide to Comics Fandom, which used to be a newspaper that was published weekly with all sorts of comic book news, and it had ads and for comic books and different things. And this guy had a big full-page ad for this auction he was having, featuring a lot of pretty cool Golden Age books. And I saw this one on there, and I was like, okay, I got to have it. But it was a phone-in auction, so it was like I would call the guy and go, okay, I bid $250, and then I'd be on hold, and he'd go, oh, someone just called and bid 300, So I had bid 300 on it. He accepted it, and it was a timed auction, so it was like over at, it was like an hour long, and we were at the end of the hour, and the time was up, and I bid 300, and he said, okay, I'll take it. But then he comes back like 30 seconds later and goes, oh, somebody just called in and offered me, 310 or 325 or something. So I ended up having to pay 350 to get it after the auction was already over. So I was a little ticked off about that, but it was his book. I guess he could do whatever he wanted. So anyway, I got that, but I got that probably 20 years ago. It's hard to guess the value on the book now because, you know, having a slight color touch up on it, it's probably going to knock about 20 to 30% off the guide value on the book for the condition it's in. So, but again, this isn't a book that I really bought to resell. It was just one that I just thought the artwork on the cover was so cool that I had to have, and finally got it. This is Smash Comics number 36 from Quality Comics. Again, an early 40s book. The interesting thing about Quality Comics is they're the ones that publish National, those Uncle Sam comics that I have. They had a fantastic stable of artists. Okay, Eisner was in there, Jack Cole, Reed Crandall, who did this cover. Big surprise, right? That I would get another comic with a Reed Crandall cover. And Lou Fine was in there. I mean, they had the best looking comics of anybody publishing in the Golden Age because they had the best stable of artists. The interesting thing about this, that character is called Midnight. No, it's not the Spirit. Eisner was doing the Spirit for Quality, but then left. And so what did they do? They ripped him off and created their own Spirit character called Midnight. But I don't care about that. I just care about the fantastic Reed Crandall cover that is there. And that's another mid-grade book, probably about a fine condition. There's a very small tear up at the top, or it would probably grade higher than that. But anyway, it's still really nice shape. Okay, this is National Comics number 30. This is actually the first Uncle Sam comic that I ever bought. And yeah, you guessed it, Reed Crandall cover. I got this off somebody had a comic shop online back in the early days. I mean, when I say early, I mean 90s, early 90s, when the internet was still just a baby. And I had always been a big Uncle Sam fan, obviously, and before I was able to find a National 26, which I talked about in an earlier video, I found this. The interesting thing about this, if you can see right up at the top here, it's signed by William Leach. Okay, that was apparently the kid who owned the book. Tilt it up just a little bit there so you can see that. Apparently the kid who owned the book and signed it, right? Well, so I got this, and we always used to joke about the William Leach collection. Well, when I got the very first issue of National 26, if you recall the story from my earlier video that I got on eBay, it was also signed by William Leach. So I ended up with two National comics signed by the same guy or kid from this personal collection. And I bought them, you know, probably 15 years apart. So it's kind of funny. But anyway, so I still have this one. And it's a solid copy, probably. I think it was sold to me as a fine, and I'll accept that grade and be happy with it. Okay, this is National Comics number 25. All right, go ahead and guess. You are correct. It's another Reed Crandall cover. I got this from Bedrock City, and this was actually the second Uncle Sam National Comics I got. And the interesting thing about this, not so much the comic, but several years later at San Diego, an art dealer actually had the original art to this cover up for sale. It was massive. It was at least twice up. And those of you who understand what that term means, a regular comic book cover is usually about 11 by 17, 10 by 15 is the actual live art area, but about 11 by 17 piece of paper. Well, back in the Golden Age, even in the Silver Age, if you look at some of Kirby's early stuff, a lot of the guys did comic pages that were twice up, meaning they were twice that size. So that was a huge illustration for this cover, and I think he wanted 20 grand for it at the time, which probably, you know, it's probably worth 3 times that now if I'd actually had it, but, you know, it's not like I had $20,000 burning a hole in my pocket. But I thought it was cool that I had the comic and actually got to see the original art, because there's just not a lot of original art floating around from, you know, comic books from the, you know, early 40s. But again, you can see that you had some soldiers in there, so it's a World War II comic, and so there's a lot of nostalgia associated with it. But it's one of my faves. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. You can also hit the notification button to get alerts when I post a new video. Make sure you come back by soon so you can check out my next episode.